Top 5, a show where we count things down from number 5 to number 1. And this week on the show, I was kind of dreading this, Rodrigo. Top 5 movies that are too close for comfort. And I'm not talking about the sitcom from the 1980s. I'm talking about movies that hit just maybe a little bit too close to home, get a little bit uncomfortable in some way, shape, or form. So we've got those this week. And my number 5 is Idiocracy from Matt Judge. And I know that a lot of people are like, oh, come on, everybody says Idiocracy. But I mean, I had the chance to watch this again recently. And I was like, no, this is really on the nose. This is really too scary and too close for comfort, especially when you get into Macho Camacho's cabinet members. And you're just like, oh, wait a minute. This is just a reflection of what we're seeing right now, especially with our Secretary of Health. And I was just like, oh, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. It's fine to make fun of stuff, but this is just getting to the point where, I don't know, Rodrigo, I think we're there. So that is my number 5 movie that is too close for comfort. What do you have for your number 5 movie that is too close for comfort?
My number 5 is something that's gonna sound a little strange, but because I feel like I do get the prompt. But my number 5 is The Land Before Time. Not because I know what it's like to be a tiny dinosaur. I mean, I wish. But because The Land Before Time was probably the very first movie that ever made me cry. Where I was like old enough to watch a movie, get what was going on, and just start bawling. So now I just kind of have like a very emotional reaction to seeing things from The Land Before Time. If I recognize it as the original piece, right? Because there's been 30,000 sequels to The Land Before Time, each more harrowing than the last. And that has sort of like tempered that response, right? So, but I don't know, there's like clips floating around, something like that, or like I'll just think about Ducky or something, and I'll start like getting emotional. So for me now, as an adult, having seen it as a kid, The Land Before Time kind of hits home sort of automatically, right? I don't have to go through the process of like seeing what's happening and feeling sad. It just sort of like skips all my defenses and goes directly for the throat.
There you go. Matthew is here. Matthew, what do you have for your number 5 movie that's a little bit too close to home?
My number 5 movie is actually one that I'm afraid is going to make you mad at me, but I feel like we kind of have to address it. Stephen and I are of an age where a lot of movies are kind of built into the fabric of our lives. And one of those is the original Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first appearance of Indiana Jones. That is not my number 5. Don't cut my mic and kill me and send the assassons. However,
too late. I already hit the send button. They're on their way. You've got 5 minutes.
That's all right. I'll tell them the same thing I tell my child. If you ever shoot me and I find out about it, we are going to have a very difficult discussion. But the sequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark is my number 5, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And Temple of Doom is really dark, really gory, really bloody, and just kind of there's something about it that just feels really grim and way out of place for the world of, 1984. It really feels like a grim, dark 1999 movie. And I started wondering about this. And, I've seen it 6, 7, 8 times. But a few years ago, I read a piece that talked about the fact that while this movie was being made, Steven Spielberg was going through an ugly breakup. George Lucas had just finished what was a relatively painful divorce. And there was just some real kind of, their lives were not in a good place. And so when you think about a movie where the first one was kind of fun and wild. And granted, it does have literal angels coming and melting the face of a Nazi, but it's not necessarily a thing where a bloody cult is trying to murder you and kill the 6-year-old boy and the little Hollywood ingenue. And then I started thinking about probably the iconic scene from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And it's the fact that the villain literally rips your heart out. And I'm like, well, then, if someone wrote that into a movie, if someone said, okay, so here it is, I'm going through a painful divorce and I'm writing a story about a monster who just literally rips your heart out. Before 2016, I probably would have told you that that's ridiculous and nobody would let you get away with that. We don't have that anymore in 2025. It's just like the most ridiculous thing that you can imagine. That's probably what's going to happen. But when I think about Temple of Doom now, and I think about that darkness, and I think about the unpleasantness, and I think about the painful lives of the creators of the movie, I'm just like, oh, I don't like it. And I've never been a huge fan of that particular movie, no matter how much you love, Ke Huy Quan, who is a wonderful, wonderful actor, even when he's like 8 years old. That movie never sat right with me. And now that I know what was going on in the background, and now that I think about it, I can't. It's just too close for comfort. It's ugh.
All right. We are now into our number 4s. So back in the day, Rodrigo, back before you were even a twinkle in your parents' eye,
Right.
We were living under the fear of constant nuclear death. The bombs are going to drop on our heads at any day now. There is no point of getting excited about the future. We're all going to die. And so for Generation X, that was pretty much life as we know it. And for Gen X young me in 1983, I sit down to watch a made-for-TV movie called The Day After. Now, The Day After is the story about NATO and the Warsaw Pact fighting over Germany, and it escalates to a full nuclear exchange between the United States and the Soviet Union. The story centers around Lawrence, Kansas, and Kansas City, and several farms in and around the Lawrence area, as they are utterly bombarded with nuclear missiles, to the point where today, if you go watch the movie, you can see clips of it online. It looks totally stupid and totally fake and quite laughable. But from 1983 made-for-TV movie terms, it was downright realistic, especially the portrayal not of the blowing up of Lawrence, Kansas, or the destruction of Wichita and Kansas City, but the aftermath of, look what life is going to be like after this, the day after a nuclear bomb drops. Now, I've mentioned this before. I grew up just south of Lawrence, Kansas. I grew up just north of Wichita, Kansas. Watching these places get destroyed only cemented into my brain that at any moment on some October afternoon while I'm stacking cords of wood, preparing for the cold, hard winters ahead, that I was going to see a flash of light, and that was going to be the end of everything. The Day After is a movie that was just a little too close for comfort. You know what I'm talking about, Matthew?
Oh, I do. I felt that same creeptitude.
Now, there was something positive that came out of that. Apparently, Ronald Reagan also saw this movie in 1983, and it moved him so much that he changed his idea on how we should confront Russia, and started to do the glasnost, Gorbachev, tear down these walls, and let's see if we can come to a peaceable agreement. Still, at the same time, the government was just like totally causing Russia to outspend itself into bankruptcy and have the collapse of the Soviet Union this way. But at least we can sit there and go, oh, this movie had a positive outcome as opposed to terrorizing teenagers in the 1980s. It led to the end of the Cold War. So that is my number 4, The Day After. Rodrigo, what do you have for your number 4?
Reagan saw that movie, and that's why Steve Gutenberg became an ambassador to Russia.
Yes, in Police Academy 27.
Yeah. Okay. My number 4 is a movie that in general is fine. except for one character, really throws me off and kind of gives me awful flashbacks. You guys have seen A Mighty Wind, right?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Every day when I go outside.
Yeah, living in Kansas, every day's A Mighty Wind. But Mighty Wind, Christopher Guest movie, all-star cast.
Yep.
It's about the bringing together all of these bands for a PBS TV special. I believe it's specific, like literally PBS. So the bands are coming together in this particular time because their former manager, or kind of like the mentor to a lot of them, passed away, and so his son is kind of putting all of this together. The son, played by, who's he played by?
Bob Balaban.
I think so. Yeah, Bob Balaban.
Mhm.
The moment that he steps on that like into frame and starts micromanaging everything gives me these like awful flashbacks to a boss I used to have. A boss that, if you've been around Major Spoilers for a long time, it's that boss. It's my worst boss ever.
WR.
Nope. That's your worst boss ever.
My bad.
My worst boss ever was the guy that was doing a show with Steven and I.
Yep.
For a long time, and just the way that this, and again, it's funny, and maybe if I watched The Mighty Wind now, I would find it very funny. But the way that he's like, and those up there, those are lights. It's like, yes, those are lights. And it's like, and is it dangerous for those lights to be up there? And it's like, well, but they're secure, so it's fine. It's like I thought I saw some cables between those two lights. Should somebody go up there and like secure that just constantly, right? That's that character's deal, but that's what that guy was like, constantly about everything, right? He was someone who had to come in and find something wrong with whatever was happening so that he could validate his own existence as a manager, I guess, because the funny thing about that place in particular, and I would suspect a lot of places, is that they run just fine without a general manager. Like when he left, we were actually without a general manager for like a few months, and like the station kept running, right? It's like nothing broke down. So a lot of the time, managers really have to like dig themselves in to make it seem like they're actually doing anything. And Bob Balaban, who does a great job, really just gives me flashbacks to my old boss. So A Mighty Wind is my number 4.
Nope, I get it. Matthew, what do you have for your number 4?
Oh, my number 4 is existentially horrifying. Although talking about my worst boss is still existential. I'm having chills. It's creepy, but it is one that I actually knew about before I knew about why I knew about it. And this was something that when I was in high school, we actually watched as part of our English class. And it is an adaptation of Macbeth, a story by William Shakespeare and or Francis Bacon and or the Duke of Earl, whoever wrote it, we don't know. But the thing about Macbeth is it's a very often remade movie. Any story from the 1600s, you figure probably has a couple of takes in it. This particular one, however, years later, my brain put 2 and 2 together. The 1971 adaptation of Macbeth is a movie by Roman Polanski. Now, if you do not know who Roman Polanski is, other than a person who fled the United States because of accusations that I can't say if they're true or not, I'm just saying there's a lot of them. Mm-hmm. If you don't know anything about him other than that, you may not realize that Roman Polanski's wife, Sharon Tate, was a young actress. And in 1967, Sharon Tate was very, very notoriously one of the murder victims of the Manson family. And the Manson family apparently came into the house and they very, very grotesquely and brutally killed Sharon Tate, who was a young pregnant woman. So, what do you think 4 years later is one of the scenes that I remember most strongly from the 1971 adaptation of Macbeth? If you say to yourself, is it people coming into someone's home, say Macduff's house, and killing people and killing Lady Macduff and murdering people, murdering small children, murdering a pregnant woman? You would be absolutely right. And so when you go and you look at this is a movie that came out in 71, which means it was probably being made in 70, possibly late 69. You kind of have to ask yourself again, oh, why am I shivering? This is really unpleasant and creepy. And honestly, it is. Now, I will say this.
Hey, I'm going to make it even more creepy for you.
Oh, God.
Sharon Tate was murdered in 1969.
Oh, my God. I thought it was 67. Oh, my God. Stephen. Oh, my God. Now I'm mad at you. Oh, anyway, yes. So you got that going for you. And I apologize for putting that in anybody's head. Also, worth noting, the film does include nude scenes by an 11-year-old actor, which just a thing that I put out there. It's one of the reasons why the film is very, very difficult to see. That was not, by the way, in the version that we saw in school. That part, not in the version that we saw in school. It is in the version that I saw in college that was available from the public library in Hayes, one of the movies that I went and, was this as terrible as I remember it? Yes, it was. And that's why it's my number 4.
We are ready to hit into our top 3 movies that are too close for comfort. And my number 3 is one that I had to show some students in class the other day. We're talking about, how do you write scenes that have bite and that have, some that really pull on the audience's knowledge and emotions and those kinds of things. And so I had to show them one of the scenes from Marriage Story. For those of you that don't know about Marriage Story, it has what's his name? The spoiled Skywalker kid, or
Kylo Ren.
It's got Kylo Ren and Black Widow in it, and they are married, and they are going through a divorce, and it's messy and ugly, and they get into some yelling, shouting matches that for anyone, and again, I think maybe not so much kids born in the 70s, but definitely kids born in the 80s, more instances of divorce going on there, and people having to listen to parents going through horrendous arguments about that. Fortunately, in the scenes that I show, the kid is not present, but definitely these two just go at it about how much they despise one another and hate one another. And I think it is very triggering for anyone who is a product of that kind of a divorce, where it is very messy, yelly, screamy, or if you were in a household where the parents fought constantly and refused to get a divorce, right? For whatever reason. But that is a movie that every time I see any of those argument scenes, I just kind of want to crawl into a ball and say, please make it go away. It's not pretty. It's ugly. But it's also very fascinating because it really shows good writing dynamics between people that are actually hating each other. And it has some very good acting, I think, between Kylo Ren and Black Widow in their ability to bring those feelings to the surface and let the camera capture that. So my number 3, Marriage Story. Rodrigo, what do you have for your number 3?
My number 3 is a movie that I went to see and I was excited about. And it was all in all a positive experience, but it did hit too close to home a few times. And that's Blue Beetle, which came out in like 2023, I want to say.
Yeah.
Blue Beetle's family is like, they're not one for one like my family at all. And in fact, if you are like my family's from Mexico.
Mhm.
We're Mexicans. Blue Beetle's family is a different flavor of Mexican than my family. It's like from a different region, right? So like if I showed this to my parents and was like, this reminds me of us, they'd be like, how? Like these are practically like we have more in common with the space aliens than we do with these guys, right?
You guys are champagne. Blue Beetle's family is merely sparkling Mexican.
I mean, it's not even that. It's like we're champagne and they're tequila, right? It's like just like to us, like it's all booze, but to us, it's just like completely different, right? So, um, but the stuff that hit me about Blue Beetle was the family interactions and the support and the sort of like support in the face um of a world that in this case is sort of like supernaturally predisposed against the main character, right? But of course that tracks as a metaphor for, kind of trying to overcome adversity, um, being Latino in the United States. It's interesting that the place where Blue Beetle takes place is like very clearly meant to be Florida. But they didn't make Blue Beetle's family Cuban. I think that would have been probably like not that there aren't tons of Mexicans in Cuba well, probably in Cuba too, but in Florida, I just figured that would track a little bit better. But it benefits me because I get to see more Mexicans on screen. Again, lots of people probably like, how can you tell the difference between a Mexican and a Cuban? You can go in indefinitely. You can tell people apart from like their neighborhoods. Anyway, yeah, what I tell people a lot about Blue Beetle when I talk to people about it, like the sort of the dynamics of the family really remind me of mine. And that if you watch a movie with a family and you're like, oh, that's kind of like this person, that's kind of like this person, and they have a weird uncle who like does weird inventions and is kind of weird about the government. If your family doesn't have a weird uncle, I have bad news for you. You're the weird uncle. So
was that the sad revelation that you had watching the movie? Is that you are the weird uncle?
It kind of was because I was like, well, so I'm old, right? But
also shut up.
But Xolo Maridueña is like, he's pretty young. And so I was like, well, this is probably more like a movie that maybe my nephews would connect more with than I did, even though I was full on connecting with it, right? And then I was like, oh yeah, well that means I'm the George Lopez character.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm okay with that. I take George Lopez on a role by role basis. I don't always like the stuff that he's doing, but he was good in Blue Beetle.
There you go.
So yeah, it's just Blue Beetle has a lot of moments. It has a couple of needle drops that, again, unless you're like Mexican, they're probably just gonna go over your head, or you're not gonna like feel them at all. But for me, I was like, okay, I gotta take a break from this scene for a second because it's this movie about a boy transmogrifying into a space beetle is getting a little too real for me.
Yeah, no, I get it. Matthew, what do you have for your number 3?
My number 3 is actually the sequel to one of my favorite movies of all time. It is a known fact that when George Romero made the movie Night of the Living Dead, he made it and accidentally they messed up the copyright. So it kind of fell into public domain, or at least people believed it fell into public domain to the point where you could get it anywhere. I think I bought my copy for 45 cents at the Walmart out of a bucket. It's also where I got most of my Fleischer Brothers Superman cartoons. But Night of the Living Dead is by no means a perfect movie, but it is a dang charming movie. And that's why I was so psyched in 1985. I'm 14 years old when the sequel, Return of the Living Dead, came out. Now, Those of you who are familiar with Return of the Living Dead, it, like the original, is a documentary. It's a documentary about what happened in Louisville, Kentucky, the night that they discovered a chemical called 2,4,5-trioxin, which has basically an unpleasant side effect of raising the dead, which is why we have all the zombies today. But more importantly, it is a story that takes place in a relatively small space with a relatively small cast. We do have some outdoor scenes. We do have some bits and pieces, but it has a moment that, much like Steven's number 5 example, kind of just taps right into the Generation X fear of, I'm going to wake up and be annihilated. At the end of the movie, the idiot characters who have spent 2 hours refusing to call the government for help, call the government for help. And as it is, as I mentioned, a documentary, the government does what the government does. It decides to write off the whole city and just hit it with a nuclear strike. And so this movie that's kind of a wacky story with people coming back from the dead. Oh, ha, ha, ha. The guys, he's dead, but he doesn't know it. Oh, ha, ha, ha. One of the guys happens to be a mortician, and he has a really kind of, I don't know if I would call it comedic, but it's an interesting moment where he realizes, I can't turn into a zombie, and I'm the only one here who actually has a crematorium. And so it seems like a great idea until the crematorium releases more 2,4,5-trioxin into the atmosphere. Anyway, whole thing, you get to the end, boom, atomic explosion. Now, the movie doesn't actually end there, because the atomic explosion, as we all know from history class, did spread the 2,4,5-trioxin throughout the Midwest and the South, which is why if you travel anywhere in Kansas, you're going to meet somebody who's clearly either dead, brain dead, or both, and they're probably going to talk like this right here. But nonetheless, getting through this movie, this wacky kind of ha-ha movie, oh, here's some weird 80s sex movies, and Linnea Quigley is in it, which means there's nudity. Again, I was 14. I am not immune to the power of Linnea Quigley. But you'd get to the end, and you're like, oh, here I am, and I'm kind of on this comedy, this horror black comedy high, and then, boom, they drop the bomb, and it's just, even now, I'm 53 years old, or something. I've just decided that I'm going to be 53 from now on, because it's a good number, and I like it. But I think about this movie, or I bump into this movie, and I have to stop before we get to the end, because I just can't sit and watch the nuclear explosion destroy Louisville, Kentucky. It's just, I can't do it. Generation X is strong in this one, and I'm just, nope, I'm out. Nope. I used to have nightmares about the tar man. Thankfully, I don't have those anymore. Because I know that if I'm in a nightmare, usually I'm awake enough to remember, do not go down any stairs. And that's why this is my number 3.
All right, we are ready for our number 2 movies that are too close for comfort. I'm a big fan of Steven Soderbergh. Sometimes his movies hits for me. Sometimes his movies kind of pass. But in general, Soderbergh often creates engaging, entertaining movies if you are willing to engage with the subject matter. And in 2011, Soderbergh was able to get Matt Damon and Lawrence Fishburne and Jude Law and Gwyneth Paltrow and Kate Winslet together to do this movie. And a $60 million budget movie, made $130 million at the box office. The critics praised it because it felt very well researched. And everyone kind of was like, I'm glad this will never happen, until December 19th December of 2019, when I'm watching the TV news and I hear about some outbreak of a disease in China. And I was like, oh, this can't be good, because I know how fast pandemics spread, because I saw both the Dustin Hoffman movie and the Steven Soderbergh movie. And this is not good. And sure enough, a month later, we were in the middle of a massive pandemic. And this movie got a lot more attention because of the eerie way that it predicted how fast the COVID-19 pandemic would spread. Of course, I'm talking about the 2011 film Contagion. Again, if you watch it when people are dying and they are dying in essentially the same SARS kind of disease.
Yeah, I think it's a SARS.
Yeah, it's a SARS
variant.
outbreak. Yeah, there as well. And so it is, if you watched it in 2011, you probably walked away going, whew. If you ever read The Hot Zone by Crichton, you were probably like, wow, this is Crichton and Soderbergh got to get together on this. But by the time 2020 hits, this movie is just like, holy crap, I don't think I could ever, ever, ever watch this movie again without having some serious PTSD reactions. And I think most people today just kind of forget about the blip, that it never happened. But movies like Contagion remind us that it did. And that is why it is my number 2 movie that hits a little too close to home. Rodrigo, what do you have for your number 2?
All right. My number 2, you guys already kind of got into the subject a little. Let's talk about generational, trauma of specific generations.
Mm-hmm.
I am the millennium, you see. I was going to, I actually got accepted into NYU, and I was going to go there in 2001, but I couldn't afford it, so I ended up going to a different school. And remember watching on TV as stuff was happening in 2001 and going like, oh, well, so I would be there right now. So with stuff like that, it's easy to forget that other stuff happened while I was in high school as well. When I was a kid, it was like the OJ trial, but something that seemed like an absolute outlier and something that seemed like it could never happen here, wherever here was, is nowadays almost a daily occurrence. We don't have a 9/11 every day, but we have a Columbine every day. And that's why when I, for some reason, decided to sit down to watch Elephant in 2003, basically hyperventilated throughout the whole movie. Like, I personally wasn't involved in a school shooting, but it is something. I was in high school when the shootings in Columbine happened. For definitely the rest of that year and probably the next year, like everybody was like freaking out, looking at everybody else. Everybody was extremely tense about it. It's difficult to articulate what it was like. Like, kids today have it way worse because nowadays, again, there's often multiple mass shootings in the same day here in the United States. But in those days, it was like suddenly realizing that like Bigfoot existed, or like that there were kaiju or something like that, right? It was like, or that vampires were real. Like, there's this thing that happened in like a few movies before, a few stories before, and people were like, yeah, that would be scary and bad. You know, there had been like campus shootings in colleges before, but never anything like Columbine. And again, it's basically beat for beat what happens in Elephant, except that for some reason they make the kids gay, which just like really complicates the theming and narrative. But all right, Gus Van Sant. I am the millennium, and I can't sit down to watch Elephant.
All right, thank you for sharing, Matthew. What do you have for your number 2?
My number 2 is perhaps one of the most traumatizing experiences in film that I've loved, especially recently. The film itself is actually, I think, from 2023, early 2024. which, hey, I'm in the actual century, you guys. I'm not talking about stuff that happened in 1988 again. But the movie, it gets me on two levels. The second one we'll go into in a minute, but primarily the movie, The Iron Claw, which is kind of a star turn for Zac Efron, and of course has Jeremy Allen White from The Bear as Kerry Von Erich, which is just absolutely inspired casting. If you've ever looked at his face and Kerry Von Erich's face, The Iron Claw is a story about the Von Erich family. And the Von Erich family is actually the Adkisson family, which they're a nice, family from Texas. The reason they have the name Von Erich was back in the day, the father, Fritz Von Erich, had an evil foreigner, specifically an evil Nazi foreigner gimmick in professional wrestling. Now, those were the days of full-on kayfabe, which means you were in character when you could be seen. And Fritz had, a buzz cut, and he was a jerk, and he was, basically just in person. But apparently, in real life, Fritz was really, really not good to his family. And so this is the story, a true story, almost with one major exception, of his children and how the curse of the Von Erich family basically was seen to have developed. Fritz lost one child. His first son died very young due to, I believe, an illness. His second son, his second son, Kevin, is the only one who's still living. David had been a very successful wrestler, died in Japan of an illness that he was trying to hide because some might say he was afraid to show weakness. Kerry Von Erich, you may remember, is a relatively famous story. Kerry died by his own hand after losing most of his foot in an accident and getting into some heavy drug use. Kerry's younger brother, Mike, actually suffered a heart attack in the ring that led to him being clinically dead for several minutes. And when he recovered, he had severe brain damage and trauma. And so Mike ended up taking his own life. This is all in the movie. It is also something that the filmmakers have pointed out. The other Von Erich brother, who died by suicide, they actually kind of had to edit out because they felt like it made the story, the true story, seem too crazy, over the top, dramatic, just too much endless grinding,
Sure.
dystopia. And I understand that. I feel like it's kind of a good decision. And it's one of those things where, honestly, if you would say to me, is this realistic? Again, I'd probably have said no. But Chris Von Erich did exist. Chris Von Erich did also take his own life. And it was, it's one of those questions where Kevin is now, I think he's in his 60s. Kevin is talking for the first time about these things that happened. Of course, the movie is made. The movie is fictionalized. But if you know the story, parts of the story of the Von Erichs, like I do, you spent that whole first watching going, oh God, because you know what's happening. You know what's about to happen, and it's not going to be good. And throughout the whole film, that just goes on and on and on. And we get to the end, and you have this lovely moment where, Kevin and his two sons and his pregnant wife go off, and they're, trying to build a happy life. And we do get the update on the real Kevin and his real family, which is nice. But throughout this whole movie, I'm just driven by, oh my God, I can't believe, oh my God, I can't. And now this, oh my gosh. And the other thing, and I say this all the time, I may not say it on the show, honestly. I say this all the time in real life. I believe that I am a well-adjusted, emotionally relatively stable, functional adult. Pause for Stephen to laugh.
No, I know how to use my mute button.
Oh, good call. Good call, brother. But every time I see a movie that has a really, really abusive father figure, especially one with a flat top buzz cut, just this ball of 17-year-old rage starts to burn in my soul, and I turn into the Human Torch. And so if that's a thing for you, I want you to know that if you watch The Iron Claw, it's going to set you off. You're going to go Human Torch. Really, really, really hard to watch, but even more tragic knowing that A, some people did not know this is a true story, and B, the true story was actually so much sadder that the guys who make up stories felt like they had to tone it down or else the audience would feel like it was going too far. And that is why The Iron Claw just way too close for comfort for me. Just, no, bad. Good movie, though. Actually, a wonderful movie. I'd watch it again.
Okay, we are ready for our number one movie that's just a little too close for comfort. And my number one, again, is one that people are like, oh, thank goodness this will never happen until we look around. And Rodrigo, this kind of does tie into my number five because, again, just look around. It is Alex Garland's Civil War 2024 movie that is set after the United States is fractured. So you have the federal government and the states that support the federal government led by a despotic fascist Ron Swanson, who has burrowed himself like a tick into the White House and refuses to leave because he is the only one that can run this country. And then you have the secessionist union of, surprise, surprise, California and Texas teaming up to try and take this despotic president down. So not only does it have Ron Swanson in it, it also has Mary Jane Watson in it as a war photographer. And we are following her story along with other journalists in her group who are madly racing to try to get to Washington, D.C. at the same time as the Texas-California Army does, as they have their final battle to determine the fate of America. And you get to that final scene where they are dragging Ron Swanson out of the presidential office and down the hallway and what happens to him. And you're like, oh man, when I saw the trailer for this film, when it first came out, I was like, oh, this is a very dangerous film. This is a film that, you know, I'm very fine with free speech and everything, and people able to express their ideas and their creativity as they want. But this one is one that I was like, this is something that could cause a lot of problems or at least give people ideas. And here we are in 2025. This movie is really good. I will say I went in already pre-triggered to just be like, oh, this is going to be the worst thing ever. And it's actually a really, really good movie. And they never talk about why the United States split apart. And it's interesting that as they drive through different parts of the United States trying to get to Washington, D.C., technically the states that they're driving through are all East Coast states. It is interesting to see how different sections of the country have grouped themselves. Like one is just complete anarchy. Another section is like, you wouldn't even know that something horrible was going on. It's just people living their normal life. And then when you get another part is just a complete war zone. And then you get to Washington, D.C., and it is just an action-packed war action film. So it's got a little bit for everybody, and it certainly makes you think. But it is probably going to be very, very too close for comfort for people who are concerned about what's going on in the real world right now. And that's why the Alex Garland Civil War movie from 2024 is my number one movie that's just too close for comfort. Rodrigo, what do you have for your number one?
My number one is a movie that, unfortunately, I end up watching very often because I take care of adults with disabilities, and one of my clients really likes it. So when you're working with a client, you watch whatever the client's watching, right? You can't be like, no, give me the TV remote, because that's bad. So I end up watching. I've watched this movie at least 10 times by now, and there is one moment in it that always turns my stomach and I just kind of have to end up watching it. I know where it is and I know that it's coming, but also I'm taking care of someone, so I can't like leave the room. And so I just try to be like, okay, whatever, it's happening. Try not to think about it too hard. This movie is Home Alone 2, and I am not talking about a hilarious scene in which the Tim Curry has to tell someone he loves them at gunpoint. That's a good scene. I'm talking about the scene where the president of the United States is not the president yet, but is now. When this is being recorded, it's just like, oh, it's right over there. I can't stand seeing that guy. This has already been like a borderline political show.
Oh, sure.
I mean, but man, can I not stand to see that guy in like any context except like a hard news situation where I'm like, I have to know what's going on with this country. Like anytime, like I obviously, God, I hadn't even thought about this, but I'm like, can you imagine sitting down to watch The Apprentice? Ugh, good Lord. So yeah, not that much to say about it. You know, Home Alone 2 is a great 2 hour long infomercial for the Talkboy tape recorder, which can't do half the things. I'm guessing half the things that Kevin McAllister does with it. But it does have a very unfortunate cameo, pretty close to the middle, I would say. So, trigger warning: Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, 1992, has a very stable genius in the middle of it.
Very good. All right, Matthew, it's time for you to get to open up a little bit of your soul and let us in and see what movie you picked for the movie that is just a little bit too close for comfort.
Well, that was number 2. I opened up my soul and the abusive dad, and now we're just back to the endless grinding nihilism of the universe, because my number 1 is a movie based on a comic book that I love. A movie featuring an incredibly talented actor who died very, very young on the set of the movie. And the movie is about his character, Eric, coming back from the dead. And of course, that movie is The Crow from 1994. We talked about Generation X being traumatized. This is one of our biggies. In 1993, during the filming of The Crow, Brandon Lee was killed by a prop gun. So you have a story about the character of Eric Draven being killed with a gun, coming back from the dead to, as an undead specter to take out the people who killed him. Okay, now I will say this. I am actually very glad that the creators of this film and that the Lee family agreed to let this be made after Brandon passed away, because the film was not complete when Brandon died. And there is some very 1994 cutting edge CGI utilized to make sure that the story holds together as well as it does. Now, it is not a cinematic masterpiece. It has some issues in terms of the way it was cut together. Maybe I don't think it was reshoots so much as we just recrafted it. Some bits and pieces had to be reutilized. Obviously, the death of the main actor means that certain parts of the story have to be done differently. And of course, it does end with a very, very dramatic and to me, I think, very moving for Brandon. It ends with a good ending for the character of Eric, which, 23-year-old Matthew could then go and say, on some weird metaphysical level, implies that there could be a good happy ending for Brandon. Especially if you've seen the movie Dragon, which came out either the year after or the year before, which implied that Brandon and his father, Bruce Lee, who both died young, were killed by a cursed samurai warrior from beyond. Yeah. I don't know. It's that movie's another thing. But this movie has everything. No, sorry. I had just had a Stefan moment, and I was going to start telling you about the guys on skateboards who are floating around because they have fire extinguishers on their back. But it is really a fun movie, and it does have, I think, one of my most wonderful little bits of casting, because the leader of the street gang in The Crow is Daniel Patrick Kelly. Daniel Patrick Kelly, one of his first roles was the leader of the street gang in The Warriors, banging the bottles together on his fingers and screaming, "Warriors, come out to play." So he starts his career, street gang. 20 years later, he's playing a street gang kid. He's got a cool beard now. He's in charge. He's much cooler. And I just feel like there's so much to love about this movie. Tony Todd is in this movie doing just incredible work. Ernie Hudson is in this movie doing just incredible work. If any of these characters were actually acting in what felt like the same movie, with the exception of the main villain and Brandon Lee, this could have been one for the ages. But when you watch it, if you were around at that time, you are going to go, "Oh man, this is the one." Now, unlike most of the things on today's list, that actually drives me to watch it whenever it's on. As of right now, I am probably being glared at by a wife who has seen The Crow at least 50, 60, 70 times. I'm not looking. I'm just assuming. Put your finger down. But if you have never seen The Crow, and you maybe are a younger person who doesn't necessarily know about, Brandon's death, or someone who never saw the movie when it came out in 94, I recommend it. But sometimes, you can't watch this movie without like a debrief, a little bit of, at the end, you need maybe like a Little Debbie and just, a few minutes of Tom and Jerry, something to just decompress your brain from it. It is a movie that cuts really, really close, just way too close for the comfort of 23-year-old Matthew or the comfort of now eternally 53-year-old Matthew. Write it down. I'm going to be 53 from now on because it's easier to remember. And that's why it's my number one.
Ladies and gentlemen, what are movies that are too close for comfort for you? You can head over to the Major Spoilers Discord server and you can share your thoughts there. You can join the Major Spoilers Discord server absolutely free. And we can't wait till you share your list with us and with everyone else. Why? Because everyone loves a list.
This podcast is copyright 2025 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.